Hi. I think it's time to build a shop mallet. I've been using a regular hammer for things that I really need a mallet for. Something with a wider head on it and something that's a little softer than a regular hammer. Something that you can tap things into place and not bang things around. So let's get started.
For this, we're going to put the big blade in.
In making this mallet, I'm going to start by making the head, and I have these pieces of scrap hardwood in the shop that I've had for a while, and I don't know exactly what it is. It's sort of an orangey color. It looks like it's probably some kind of tropical hardwood, but it's nice and dense and heavy, and I think it'll make a good material for a mallet. Now, in making the head, it's going to consist of a center core that will have 2 holes drilled in it, and I'll fill those with lead shot to give it even more weight. To cover those holes, I'll have 2 thinner plate pieces glued to either side of those holes. I'd also like to wood turn both the head and the handle on this hammer, so I need to make sure that the cavities filled with shot don't come out to the surface as I turn the cylinder of the head. So that's why there's a circle drawn on below that I'm working off of. Now I'm figuring out where to drill those holes, and I'll make those cavities for the shot, and there'll be 1 on each side of the head to the mallet. The other thing that the core needs is a mortise running all the way through with a 2-degree angle on each side, and this will receive the tenon from the handle. So I'll put a plate piece down, and then each side of the center of the head, and I'll glue all that down. And you can see there's an angle, and this will keep the head from flying off. I'll glue the 2 core pieces onto one of the side plates, and I'll let that set up. Now the 2 faces of the 2 pieces need to be perfectly coplanar to take the second plate. So I'll sand them to make them perfectly coplanar. Blow the dust out. I'll fill them with the shot. I got this at a fishing shop. It's a lot easier than melting lead and going through all that. I packed the shot in as well as I could, but it still rattles a little bit. And really all that matters here is getting these seams to be nice and tight. The outside shape of the head at this point doesn't really matter. I'm going to turn it on the lathe down to its final shape. There, and it's starting to come together. We'll glue this up and let it set. Definitely has some weight. Now I'll get it cleaned up and ready to go on the lathe. Using my scroll chuck seemed like a good way to go. Making sure it's clear of the tool rest. What I decided to do is to get one side round and then flip the head around and get the other side round. And then on the second side actually get to the final shape and the final surface. I check a bunch of times to make sure my diameter is similar. And sand and actually get that final surface on one side. And then turn it around. And I've got a few little wood shims in there to protect the surface on that final turning. And yes, that lead does make it heavier. Now I'll work on the handle. And in this I decided to cut the corners off to make the turning go a little quicker. I finally get to use my Tenoning Jig I've had for a few years. I haven't found a project to use it on yet. So what I need to do now is cut a tenon in the handle that'll fit in the hole that I made in the head. I'm getting my width right here because it needs to fit nice and snug in that hole. And I want that tenon to be a little bit longer than the depth of the hole in the head. So that's what I'm doing here. We'll start to clean up the tenon. It's just a little bit too big, which is good. It's better than it being just a little bit too small. And I need to carve the curve of the head into the seat of the tenon. So I'll cut part of that curve on the bandsaw, and I'll use the router to take off the other part of the curve at the seat of the tenon. And it worked pretty well. I got pretty close with this method. And then it's just a matter of turning the handle. I wasn't entirely sure what kind of shape to make, but I just kept rechecking it and feeling what it felt like in my hand. I thought maybe if I made it a little thinner near the head, it would give it a little bit of spring, and it would be a little more comfortable when you hit material with it. That feels pretty good. I'll cut off a little bit of extra. And I still have to do a little bit of carving on the seat of the tenon to get it to fit right on the head. Now I'm ready to glue the head and the handle together, and I need 2 shims to fit into the tenon, and it will widen the tenon up into the mortise on the head and help it fit very, very tightly and keep the head from coming off the handle. Get those to just the right width.
If I do this again, I'm going to drill a round flat hole where the tenon comes into the head, on the head, and that'll be there to receive the handle. So the way it is, the way I've done this one, the end of the handle has to be cut to fit the head, and it's sort of a hand carved, or it is a hand carved shape, and it's just, I'm not able to get it as nice as I'd like it. Whereas if I had a machined hole for the handle to go into, I could then turn the handle to fit nicely into that drilled hole. And I think it would make a better look on the handle, that's all, or on the hammer.
Then came the moment of truth, gluing the head and the handle together. The one problem I ended up having here was my wedges weren't wide enough, or weren't thick enough, so that they bottomed out before they widened up the tenon enough. So I ended up having to make a second set of wedges on the outside of the tenon, and that ended up working. I got the lesson here is to make sure your wedges are going to be wide enough.
Well, there it is. In the end, I think it came out pretty nice. I would have done this seam a little bit differently, like I talked about earlier. And I think overall, it's just a little bit too big. It's not supposed to be a sledgehammer. It's just for tapping things. So I do this seam a little differently, and I make it a little smaller. But besides that, I really like it. It's got a nice feel, and this wood is really beautiful. So thanks for watching.